When you make modifications to a catalogue part, it's critical that you understand that when you make the change, it will be reflected in every spec that you create from that catalogue. When we modify the information in the spec, it affects only that spec. When you modify the catalogue, the change is reflected everywhere. To make sure you really understand this before you make the changes, let's run through a quick exercise to show you. So I want you to come down and open a spec here. So we'll go from our desktop, exercise files, 0303 modifying parts, and open your LinkedIn CS150 spec. Okay, so now let's take a look at the piping. So you'll see the piping has material shown in here, which is carbon steel. Now we added that to the spec. It doesn't exist in the catalog. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete this item from the spec. We're going to make a modification in the catalog, and then we're going to re-add this piping into the spec. So I'm going to close this down. I'm going to highlight the seamless pipe, and we're going to remove that from the spec. So now we're going to load another catalog here. So we're going to come down to our catalog drop down, open catalog, and we're going to navigate to our desktop, exercise files, 0303 modifying parts, and we're going to choose the pipes and fittings catalog, and we're going to open. Now let's go up to our catalog editor, and we're going to filter this for pipe. Make it a little bit smaller here. And we're going to look for a long description. We want to have our pipe seamless plain end ASME B3610. Now let's take a look at the criteria that we have here. Now that I'm highlighting this here, you'll see that we don't have material. Now when we looked at that spec, there was a carbon steel material was listed in here. So I'm going to add some material to the catalog this time, but I'm going to make an intentional spelling error here. And we're going to put that in as material, and we're going to save this back to the catalog. Now we're going to go back into our spec, and we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to make sure we're in the right catalog, and we're going to filter this now. So we're going to filter for pipe. I'm just going to look straight for that long description. And you'll see that the material is now loaded with an incorrectly spelled carbon steel. So I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to add that to the spec. So now going forward, if I use that spec, if this spec's opened and somebody looks at this, they're going to just see this value here. They're not going to see the catalog and notice that this is spelled incorrect. But if we actually click on this, you'll see that it does have carbon steel. Now I'm going to say OK. Now the problem with that is now every time a bill of materials is printed out in a model that used this spec, that mistake's going to be in there. Now in this case, this is just a spelling error, so it's not critical. If this was a dimensional error and we had placed a decimal point in the wrong place, this mistake would be propagated through not just this spec, but every time going forward, somebody who uses this particular type of component, the seamless pipe, this B3610, that dimensional error, whether it's a wall thickness or if it's a component, a dimensional error in a component such as an elbow, every time that component is used in a project, the calculations are going to be wrong, and that can be very costly. So modifying the parts is a straightforward exercise, but you have to be very, very sure you're making the correct changes in the correct document. If it's just specific to one project, make the change in the spec. But if it's something that you want to change in a catalog, if you want carbon steel to be in every single material description, then make the change in the catalog, which is a universal change. What we saw here was just a spelling error, but if the mistake was made while editing dimensions, you can see how quickly this would grow into a really big problem. So when you're editing parts, the key is always be diligent in your checking and always have them checked by a second pair of eyes.